Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. I hope everyone in the United States had a wonderful Thanksgiving yesterday and that everyone else in the rest of the world had a very nice Thursday. Now, someone who's having a great Thanksgiving and fantastic holiday weekend in general is Disney, as Frozen is doing quite well at the box office and is on track to potentially break the Thanksgiving holiday weekend record. And this is great news for Disney overall because the wealth just keeps rolling in, as just earlier this very week it was announced that the studio, for the first time ever, has passed $4 billion worldwide. I reported just a little bit earlier in the month that they had already broken their previous record of around $3.7 billion worldwide. And now they've set a new one, and they're just going to keep going because they have a whole other month to go of December to just bring in and stuff that turkey as much as possible, but they have, $4 billion already, which is an impressive haul. And I think it shows that their buying spree has really paid off. And also their revamping of their own in-house, Disney animation. While I might have had problems with the film, clearly, at least opening weekend, Disney is giving audiences what they want. Another Disney princess musical. Now, I said stuffing the turkey, and I mentioned that I wasn't a big fan of Frozen, and I'm wondering if you guys think that Disney is just putting out turkeys and very well marketed turkeys, but they don't taste so good when you actually bite into them. Or do you think that Disney is just firing on all cylinders and you love everything they put out? So I'm just curious. So this year they've had Iron Man 3, Oz the Great and Powerful, Monsters University is for them, Thor The Dark World, obviously, Frozen. These are all big Disney films. And they have also Saving Mr. Banks coming down the pike. So they still even have one more film to go. And I think Disney fans will turn out in full force for that film. I don't know how it's going to do at the Oscars. I think Academy, I haven't seen it yet, but I think there's some question as to whether or not they're whitewashing it a little bit. I guess that's not the right term. But they're making it look a little bit nicer because, of course, it's hard to tell a really true, biting, realistic story about your own studio. But I've heard very good things about the film, though, so I think it is going to deliver at least on the fun, heartwarming side, which, Disney's, that's supposed to be their specialty. But I think their specialty now is making money. So good for them. It's always nice to see somebody succeed in Hollywood, and they're doing it, as I pointed out on earlier Movie Math, by only making blockbusters. So I think this really works against the idea of releasing smaller films that don't help your bottom line because, at least hopefully they'll win some gold at the Oscars, but Disney clearly has a winning strategy of only putting out tentpole pictures. Tentpole is a term for a film that's usually supposed to hold up a whole slate, but they just have nothing but tentpoles. There's a very high ceiling over at the Disney studios, and even better because they can hold all their money there. All right, so that's the first story of the day. It's a light movie news week, obviously, because of the holiday. Hollywood is on vacation. They're enjoying their Thanksgiving. But there's an interesting controversy that's broken out online about Oldboy and Spike Lee. I'm going to give you the short version of the story if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty details. I've put a link down below to Bleeding Cool, which really found this story, dug it up and has been covering it. So basically, there's a graphic designer named Juan Luis Garcia, and he got an opportunity to put in some submissions for the ad agency that was in charge of coming up with poster designs for Spike Lee's Oldboy. So they told Juan Luis Garcia, they said, look, we don't have a lot of money, but we'll pay you if any of your ideas get chosen. So he's like, this is fantastic. What greater exposure for me than to do the poster for a Spike Lee movie, and I'm such a big fan of the guy's work. I'm so excited. So he works really hard on all these mock-ups for the posters. So, and they say, well, we're going to pay you X amount if your work gets chosen. So what do you know? They call him up. The ad agency calls this guy back up, Juan Luis Garcia, and says, Spike loves your mock-ups. He loves several of them. We're going to go with one. But even though we said we were going to pay you X amount of dollars, we actually want to pay you the much lower Y. And they kind of felt they had him over a barrel because they're like, Spike Lee's going to use it. So and they're like, but we're going to pay you less. And then they say, but your exposure you're going to get is wonderful. So Juan Luis Garcia takes a long, hard, moment to think about it. And he says, you know what? This is really insulting. This is less money that I would make on a much lesser job that was paying me appropriately. And I just don't want to be involved in the whole thing. I'm backing off. So the agency calls him up and starts harassing him. They're like, we're going to sue you. You're never going to work again. You're a horrible person to turn this opportunity down, blah, 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 blah. And so Juan Luis Garcia just at this point is like, I hate everything to do with this movie. It's ruined it for me. I'm really upset. But he walks away. And it's also annoying for him when he sees, they do indeed use his design for the final poster or, something very similar. But what really got him was that he was, first off, what happened is that he said, okay, well, I'm going to post, you said I could use this work for exposure, so I'm going to post my mock-ups on my website and my portfolio so I can get further work. And everyone on the internet, of course, finds them and goes, oh, these are fantastic, and they share them and they go out. They to Juan Luis Garcia's surprise, become quite popular on the internet. Well, they show up, apparently they have Google search running over at the ad agency, and the ad agency is like, what the hell? They call them up and they say, you shouldn't be talking about this. We didn't pay you. You are not a friend of this production. We're going to sue you. And so they start harassing him and calling him up for days. So Juan Luis Garcia is just so appalled and so upset. But as I said, what really got him was that he's going around and he finds out, I guess someone told him, I'm not sure exactly how he found out, but 40 Acres and a Mule on their Facebook page for Oldboy are putting up his mock-up designs with 40 Acres and a Mule's copyright logo on the poster designs. And Juan Luis Garcia is like, are you kidding me? You didn't pay for this work, and now you're claiming ownership of it? He gets really furious, and he writes an open letter to Spike Lee. And he's explaining everything that happens, and he's just really disappointed, and he said, I still have not been paid anything from this ad agency for my work. And even though I did 2 months of work or something like that, exclusively working for you, this is just so appalling. So you think, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to look like a hero, Spike Lee. Call up this ad agency, find out what they promised him initially, write the man a check, wipe your hands of the whole thing, maybe take a picture with him, tweet it out. It's beautiful. That's not what happened. As we all know, Spike Lee has a problem with Twitter. He criticizes things a lot, a little Alec Baldwin-y there, and his too much freedom for him is apparently a bad thing. But he's like, look, I don't know who this guy is. I never heard of him. I got nothing to do with this, and I'm not paying him a single cent. It's actually what he tweets out. And so, of course, a lot of people are tweeting him back being like, hey, look, buddy, just pay the guy. It's like, come on, pay your graphic designer. It's really horrible for you to do this. And Spike Lee gets like super defensive. And I think one of the things he tweeted out, for instance, just to keep this story going, I'm like, Spike Lee, at least just for the very least, shut up about this and just let it die. Spike Lee goes, hey, I don't appreciate being harassed. And are you going to ask someone to pay you for tweeting on Thanksgiving? So just, it's like takes 10 seconds to tweet. I guess maybe not to, maybe if Spike thought more about his tweets, then maybe they would be worth money and also not hurt him. But I just think this is a reason why I brought it up. Not only is it very interesting to see the behind the scenes and the reality of working in Hollywood, especially for freelancers. But I also thought it was important to really bring up, this is a new, Hollywood's been treating people bad for a very long time. But it's gotten worse when there's no longer a studio system. Because if you can't consistently treat people bad, they run into really bad problems. I think that, there are some stories about, for instance, people in the studio system being given lots of perks, but not being paid a lot or getting a lot of attention or a lot of credit. But that, at least that was, you bought into it and you felt you had some ownership. But here people are just left for dead on the side of the road and their work is stolen. And I'm a very strong believer in work. I feel that, I respect people's creative abilities, and I think that that's hugely, I come from a comedy background, and I think you should never steal somebody else's joke. You should always give credit where credit is due. And I even have a hard time understanding, how some comedians on television who have writing staffs don't feel guilty for I guess they pay them for their joke, but still, you're representing somebody else's joke as your own, and that always, kind of rubs me the wrong way. Some people ask me, or they used to, I write every single thing that comes out here, and it's always, these are always my opinions and my thoughts and my analysis, and if I ever do bring up something that somebody else brought up, you'll notice that I always credit them. So I just feel that, creative ownership is very important, and I think that Spike Lee's really violated that, and maybe he just got nervous, or, but he should have consulted with his lawyer if he was nervous about something like that before tweeting. And I just think, it's something just about common decency. So, and you see this thing going on with DC, what they're doing with their writers. So I'm just saying, always be careful. Don't get blinded by star power and be like, oh, I get to work with Spike Lee. Be like, this ad agency is horrible. So I hope that these people, I don't think the name's been put out of the agency that did it, but I think that they really, nobody should ever work with them again. I think it's just horrible. But this happens a lot. I've run into stuff like this with comic book stuff. I've had some horrible experiences. It's a really tough business, and people are cutthroat. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day, oh yes, I like this one. Okay, is the MPAA in HBO's pocket? The reason I say this is because they have been slicing literally slicing a number of films so these films can get R ratings and not NC-17 ratings. And I bring this up because it's mostly for sex scenes, very graphic sex scenes, but it'll be hard to get more graphic than the stuff that you can see on HBO these days. So in my opinion, it makes me feel like either the MPAA is really out of touch, that they're like trying to heavily censor R-rated films, but nobody's bothering to censor television, so that I think they should realize that audiences are changing what they see in general, so I think what you see in a film can change. For instance, by the way, Oldboy, a lot of people are saying I had a problem with the violence. I actually didn't have a big problem with the violence in Oldboy. I had a problem, spoilers, huge spoilers coming if you haven't seen Oldboy. I had a huge problem with the incestuous sex scene between a father and daughter, two of them. So, and implied between other members of families. So I think that's what I had a problem with. And that, to me, is NC-17 worthy still. Because HBO hasn't gotten there yet. I'm sure that's on their to-do list. I probably saw Oldboy, heard about it, and was like, that's interesting. And maybe they'd have done it on a show that I don't watch. HBO basically just will do anything. But I think I personally feel the MPAA should realize that audiences are evolving, changing, the market changes, entertainment evolves, and they should, raise their standard. I mean, they should change their what the rules are for getting an R versus NC-17. Or, as I said, HBO's paying them to make sure that people go, hey, if I want to see sex on a screen and not actually watch porn, but I want to, watch respectable porn, I guess I have to still turn to HBO. So the movies in question. Well, the big one that's getting a lot of coverage is Charlie Countryman with Evan Rachel Wood, because she took to Twitter and she was particularly upset that the scenes that were cut were scenes of her getting oral sex from Shia LaBeouf. That's Shia, he's so crazy. And she said, but a bunch of other violent scenes were kept about people getting their heads blown off. And she said she was sure if there had been a rape scene, it would have been okay. Or if she had been giving oral sex to Shia LaBeouf, it wouldn't have been cut. And she felt that the MPAA was, rallying against female sexuality. I don't really know if that's the case. I feel just it's unusual to see that kind of stuff, female sexuality on film. So I think that they felt people weren't desensitized to it. Maybe that's why it was cut. But I do agree, if you're going to have a lot of violence, how can you have a problem with the sex? I'm not sure. I'm not saying give this a PG-13, but I don't know about the R versus NC-17. But the other film that surprised me that got sliced was Wolf of Wall Street. Apparently it had some graphic sex scenes in it and some drug use, and had to have some scenes cut out to qualify for an R. I thought that was fascinating. I was like, because it looked very mainstream to me from the trailers, so I was like, what's going on here? But I don't know. I'm very happy at the very least that the Wolf of Wall Street final cut is 2 hours and 59 minutes. As some people have pointed out, it is longer than The Hobbit. I think that's fantastic. I'm so excited to see it. I can't wait. And I guess if there'll be a director's cut where you can see an even longer version with more sex and drugs. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. The viewer question comes from J.R. Rollins 84. And this kind of plays into, studios, how they treat their talent or people who are working for them. And the question is, why is Walt Disney talked about more than the directors in the movies he produces? And I think that's an excellent question. And you'll notice that happens in animation in general, J.R. Rollins 84. Because, first of all, I think on the nice side, the not hurting anyone's feelings or being mean side, animation is a much more collaborative medium. You have a ton of people working on it. There isn't just like the director, the actors, and the DP, and the producers, and the writer. That's a pretty small group in comparison to who works on an animated movie. And also, if you go watch the Blue Sky Studios studio visit that I covered, I'll put the link to it at the end of this video, you can see that the director is more of a conductor when it comes to animation, and really leaves a lot of people that are working for him to their own devices. And basically, the director just kind of oversees everything. They're not as intimately involved as they are in a live-action film. So that's one reason I think that you don't see a lot of ownership from directors in general in animation. Now, the reason Walt Disney gets so much credit is because he was a detail man, and he was heavily involved and really a visionary for his company when he was alive, and was heavily involved in every aspect of his films. And there are famous stories about the sweatbox of having to sit there and watch the dailies in this really small little room that was very sweaty, called the sweatbox for that reason, that Disney would very intently watch the rough animation that had been done to approve it and make sure it was working. So I think when you have someone that hands-on at so many stages, that's why he gets a sense of ownership. I think not a single cell goes up on a Disney animated movie that Disney did not look at and was not involved in. So he was involved from beginning to end, and I think his his opinions trumped even the directors of the films he was working on. So that's that reason. The second is you'll notice that one of the big names to come out of Disney recently has been Chris Sanders. The guy directed, sorry, I'm just checking the time, have been directing Lilo and Stitch. And he got really a lot of ownership. It was very inventive. It was a very different look and style and different kind of story for Disney, very mischievous. He was naughty. And I think Chris Sanders got a lot of attention out of that film. I mean, he was the voice of Stitch just as Walt Disney was the voice of Mickey. But then he wanted to do a film called American Dog, which ended up being Bolt. And the suits at Disney really had a lot of problems with the creative choices he was making, despite doing so well with Lilo and Stitch. They should have just been like, you know what? Let him try it. He did so well the first time. But they were really meddling to the point where Chris Sanders was taken off of his film. And it became Bolt, which was not particularly good and didn't do particularly well at the box office. So maybe I wish we could have seen American Dog. American Dog seemed to have a lot of comparisons. It was like a Disney version of Brian from Family Guy almost. You can look up the pictures online. They have, him with a gun, like a poker table, very funny stuff. So Chris Sanders left the company. He was like, I can't believe you did this to me. And he went to DreamWorks, where, of course, he gave them How to Train Your Dragon. He overhauled the Croods for them quite successfully. And he has a wonderful career going there, where Jeffrey Katzenberg, who also left Disney under similar horrible circumstances, is giving him a lot of creative freedom and reaping the financial and fan and financial rewards, all three categories. But I think Disney wasn't sorry to see him go, because I think Disney animation is not really a place for stars. Disney animation wants to have a homogenous, unified front to fans, and you'll notice they don't really make an effort to develop any particular talents over there. Some people do stand out a little bit. Don Hahn is a producer. But, there is really nobody there that's like Brad Bird, for instance, but he left, he's gone. He came in, and only Pixar brought him in. So you'll just see that there isn't really, you'll notice there are no real stars at Disney Animation, and I personally feel they should question that decision, because I feel they're starting to put out some really homogenous stuff. But look at the first story. Frozen is dominating. I think that Disney's not going to change a single thing. And it seems a lot of you are very happy with that. So that's great for everybody all around. So that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for tuning in. Write down below what you think of today's stories and the viewer question, and what you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your holiday weekend, and a nice weekend for everybody else as well. Bye.